Okay folks, welcome back. This is your old pal Hondo doing another video for you fine folks on another Zebco fishing reel tutorial on how to take it apart and how to put it back together again. Will be on the late 90s 202. You can tell it's a 90s 202 with the flat metal handle and green and like beige looking body on the reel right here and the gold lettering. That's the 90s right there, and we'll show you how to take it apart and clean it. It's one of the most easiest reels to clean. The only tool that you really will need for this job is a small flathead screwdriver or a medium-sized flathead screwdriver. This is where an adjustable wrench comes in. Adjustable screwdriver comes in handy. This is the Made in USA buyer's guide, also to a good 202 or 33. If you look on the foot of the reel, the modern like imports will say made in China. If it says made in the USA, that means you got a good reel for you. These were die cast aluminum gears in this reel and steel pinion gear. Very well made. These were made in Brunswick, New Jersey in the 90s. This is either early 90s, late 90s. You can tell by the handle. The 80s reels, like late 80s reels that were in this design, had holes in the handles like this one here. So that's how you can kind of tell their age. Anything before that has a double handle crank. That's early 80s, 70s, 1970s into the 1960s. If it has a double crank and a green body, that means it's 80s. If it had like a double handle crank and a white, like a green body or something like that with an X mark on the foot, that's 70s. And usually the late 60s, early 60s 202s are black covers and have a little like a little plastic thing on top as the brake on the reel. For a brake on the reel, that would be a 4-notch from the 1960s with a black cover. This also will go for the 404, 606 on how to take one of these older 606s, 404s, and 202s apart. They're very similar on the inside, besides the X and minus the bait runner switch from the 90s on these models. So this should be a manual how to take those apart too with these 90s 202s and mid 80s and 1990s all the way into the early 2000s 202s that were being made here in the United States. Okay, the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure the drag is set all the way to the lowest setting. Pull the cover off. If that cover's stuck and it won't come off, because that happens to a lot of these older reels, put it in the freezer for a few hours and it should break it loose. You take the top off, like I said. You can either use a wrench, small wrench, or a flathead screwdriver. We're going to use the flathead screwdriver right here. And we're going to take this screw off here, right here. And take that off. And pull off the spinner cone. Pull the reel out of the... You can pull, at this point, you can just pull the cover, the back cover off like that. Like I said, it's a very simple gear system. It's got old grease, so we're going to clean it up, some 409 and a toothbrush. Just take the parts off, put it in a small container like that. I think they put a little bit too much grease on this, so very simple. Here's the drag knob, and the reason why you set it that way, when you take off the spool, it lowers the spool down to where when you pull it off, you put the spool back on. When you put the spool back on, you have to push this up and put the spool back on it so it hits those little teeth on the bottom. Next thing you want to do is take off the pin that holds the spool on. Just take a flathead screwdriver and just wedge the pin out like so. Comes right out really easy like that. And you can just set it off to the side. It doesn't really need to be cleaned. At this point, you can take the small spool off of it, but when you put the spool back in here, you have to put it in jagged edged in first. Take that off, put it in a small container. We're going to remove the nut off of the of the handle cranked so we can get the helix wheel gear out, then the pinion gear. You take that small size 10 wrench and just wrench it off of there. And you don't need to clean the screw. Just honestly, I don't even think you need to clean the handle, to be honest. But like I said, if you wanted to, you could take a wire brush to it or some steel wool or something like that if you wanted to do that with it. Now you can pull the pinion gear out at this point, and as you can see, it's really dirty. It has no ball bearings in this reel. And put it in the tub and take off the wheel gear. The gears are really nice on this. It doesn't look like it was used very much. Put that in the tub, and here's the anti-reverse switch. Remember now, when you put this anti-reverse switch in, the fat end goes in front of the wheel gear and the skinny end goes on the top and the back in that order. So when you put that wheel gear back in, this anti-reverse will function. You can just take a rag and wipe all the old grease off of that. Right here's a big old clog of grease. This shouldn't take too long to clean. We'll just take a rag and get that clogged old grease up out of here. I'm going to throw this body into the bath here, and we're going to clean just these 3 parts. I'll throw this in here too, might as well. And we're going to spray it down with 409. Take a toothbrush to all the parts, and if it's too clogged up, we'll use a wire brush just on the gears itself. If you need to use a wire brush for that, we're going to clean this real quick with some 409 and rinse the parts off. We'll be right back. Okay, folks, we got all the parts clean now, and we're ready to grease the reel and reassemble the parts back into the reel. X minus a few other things. Alright. We got the spinner cone clean. Now this is different than the modern Zebco spinner cones. It had this like jagged toothed edge. This design on these reels lasted from the 60s, from the original reels to the basically to the 90s, and then they switched it to the one pickup pin spinner cone, which I think this was a lot more effective than the modern pickup pin spinner cones on the newer Zebcos, because the newer Zebcos pickup pins in the metallurgy and the spinner cones kind of deteriorate after a while and put a slit in the spinner cone from line wear. This never does that with these older models of spincast Zebco reels. We clean basically all the parts. We clean the spinner cone, the cover, the spool, the body, the gear, and the pinion gear, the wheel gear and the pinion gear with some 409 and a toothbrush, and clean this handle up a little bit. And now we're ready to oil it and reassemble the reel. Okay, the first thing you want to do is you want a good dedicated lithium grease. Like this Lucas Red stuff will work pretty good. I basically put it on all my reels. It's about the equivalency of pin grease. Now, the first thing we're going to always do is what we put in the reel first is what you grease first, which is the wheel gear. You don't need much grease, just a little bit on the gear wheel right here will do. Right here on the gear wheel, and lightly coat the shaft with whatever excess grease you got on your fingers will do. You don't need much grease. And maybe a drop of oil or two on it. Drop of oil on there. Rub it all in there really nice with the grease. It'll make it coat very well. And the next thing we're going to grease is the pinion gear. You don't need much grease on that neither. Just a little bit of grease on the gear itself and the forward shaft of the pinion gear. And you know, this is a good reel. They made these gears really well back in the days. So that's why this reel is still holding up to the test of time. Now the plastic body on these reels will give out before the inner working of the gears will. Yeah, that's about all we're going to put on there. But I'm going to put a little bit of oil on the back of this this pinion gear. You don't really need grease. Just a drop of oil will do on that and on the body of the gear itself. And we're just going to rub that oil in like that with it to make it an extra greasy surface here. And that's basically all the grease you need. You don't need much grease. They overly grease these from the factory, I guess for long storage, I guess. I don't know. I'm going to put a little bit of grease right here on this pickup pin right here underneath the, just hold it like that, get a little bit of grease and go underneath it like this, rub it underneath it like that, and that should be enough grease right there to keep it from, so it'll operate correctly when you're using it. And maybe put a little bit of oil on the cam as well. There you go. This is a great reel for kids, so you ain't gonna find a better reel than this. And that's basically all the greasing we're gonna do, besides put a little bit of grease on the bottom of this spool here, and in the center of the spool right there, which will help. And then on the body of the reel here itself, just a little bit. You don't want terribly too much, because what you got to put on is what you got to take off later when you clean it again. So that's about it. I forgot to grease those, the body of the reel and the spool of the reel. Now we're going to reassemble the reel, and the way you do it first is you want to take this little anti-reverse switch like this. You want to put the fat end down first, and you want the little skinny end right here on top, and you just want to put that wheel gear back in there like so, and make sure it's operating, and it should be operating. Yeah, it's working. And put in the pinion gear in the center of the reel. That's as easy as that. Sometimes you got to work that pinion gear in there. It'll work itself in there. Once you do that, you could put on the handle real quick. The handle goes on right here. Put this handle on like so. And the earlier reels, you couldn't just pull the whole body out of the reel. You had to take out the handle first. These newer reels from the 90s, you could just pull the whole body out of the reel, which makes it very convenient to take it apart and put it back together again. Size 10 wrench to tighten up that nut like so. And don't tighten it too much or you'll strip the thread. That's good enough. Just want to get it tight enough to where, you know, you check the function. Oops. Ain't got the reel quite put together yet, but once you do that, you put the spool back in. You want to lift up on the bottom of the drag bar so it helps itself get back on the reel properly. At this point, you can check the drag. It seems to be working. Okay, after you get all that put together, you gotta put the pin back in. Pin back in to hold the spool in place. Little pinion gear, and then you put on the small. Oh, jeez Louise. Then you put on this spinner cone. Find the nut for the spinner cone. Work it on, you know, hand tighten it first a little bit, and then once you hand tighten it, cinch it down with a screwdriver until it's tight. Hold on to the spool like this and tighten it up. That's tight enough, and we'll put the reel back into the frame of the body of the reel. Goes in like so, and I forgot to oil the drag knob. Sometimes you gotta put a little bit of oil on the drag knob as well, just a little bit underneath the drag knob and on the bar. Helps it coat the bar so it doesn't rust. You know, you can take a Q-tip and just rub that oil all over that inside of it. You know, oh my God, it's stuck in there. On the other side of the drag bar and all that, you know, just work that oil in there like this, like massage it in there until the oil gets underneath the drag knob, and then put it back in the frame of the reel, and then you know, you check the drag from here on out. Put the line through the cover. It's one of the downsides about these older Zebcos. These newer 90s models is Zebco's. It was cool that it had this kind of easy access frame, but the reel had a tendency of falling out of the cover all the time, which was somewhat of a minor nuisance. You put the cover back on, and at this point you can check the drag. It's on the lowest setting, and then put it on its highest setting to see if the drag is working. Put it on its lowest setting, and yeah, it's working. The line broke off. It's old line. Okay, there you go. That's a fully functional service reel. You put a little bit of oil if you have a little bit of squeaking noise in the handle. I know these are cheap reels, but I think they're worth saving if you see them at a flea market. They're a good kids reel, or just a good pan fishing reel if you want to put 6-pound test on it. Take it pan fishing. Good crappie reel. If you can't afford an expensive crappie reel, this one will work. Put 6-pound tests on this thing and use it for vertical jigging or float fishing with a longer rod, like a 6-foot or 6'6" medium light casting rod. There's no other better reel than these older American made Zebco 202s for pan fishing. That's what I use them for. Predominantly I put like 6-pound tests on them and then go pan fishing with them. That's what I do with them from the bank, or trout fishing with bait. It's my bait rod or my vertical jigging float rod or something like that. It works good for all those type of situations. They're not really good for like trying to run a fast lure in the water, because they're 6-to-1 gear ratio. They're not very fast, but they're good with bait though. I mean, they're excellent little bait reels, easy to clean. Take them freshwater fishing with you. I've used them saltwater too to catch saltwater fish as well, but they won't last as long in saltwater as they will in freshwater. But this reel is almost, I don't know, 26 years old, and it still works, and it's in good working order. And I've used it for years. This is a reel that I had back in the 90s. So y'all take it easy. This has been another maintenance and review on the plastic 202 from the 90s. This will also work, the maintenancing on this will work on a 404 or a 606 from the 90s as well. So it's just a tutorial guide for that as well. Well folks, if you like this video, please hit the like, share, and subscribe. If you like this fishing reel maintenance video, please tell me what you think of it. You all know what you can do. You put God first, He put you first every time. You know what else, YouTube? God loves you, so does Hondo. Peace out, YouTube.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love